Brilliant. Excellent. Okay, so guys, just as an introduction, Philip Charter is a writer and a teacher who helps non-native speakers develop their writing in English. His short stories, poetry, and flash fiction have featured in magazines and anthologies around the world. Last year, 2021, the title story from his second collection, The Fisherwoman, won the Loft Books short story competition, and he was nominated for a Pushcart Prize. 15 Brief Moments in Time is published by V Press in May, or will be published in May 2022, so this month, and it's his debut novella-in-flash. So Phil, would you like to step in and give your first reading?
Great, yeah, thanks, Will. All right, without further ado, I'm going to give you a short reading from the first chapter of 15 Brief Moments, which features Luca, the main character, who is a professor in Italy. And in this short reading, he is remembering back to his student days. Luca sets a coffee pot on the stove, then goes back to bed. It's the afternoon already, he says to the girl looking out the window. And? Their scent permeates the room. It is the entire history of their brief relationship. As a 19-year-old undergraduate in the city of Perugia, Luca's lucky to have a studio flat arranged by his aunt. Dark wood, sun-faded wallpaper, and zealous pictures of Jesus on the cross. When he moved in, he didn't bring much more than his notebooks and a holdall. He watches Gisella observe the people in the square below. The muscular detail of her back is hidden by a cascade of espresso black hair. After 2 weeks of sharing the apartment, Luca is still no closer to understanding what drives her. Tell me again. Tell me about this theory again, she says, still gazing at the street. Luca replies from his side of the crumpled bed. What I said about the bubbles? It's more of a thought, really. Whatever it is, I love it. It's that, he says, looking at the ceiling. Time exists in invisible bubbles, billions of them, which change in shape and size. They can fit inside your head or be as big as the ocean. This is your experience. Gisella, who's supposed to be in a linguistics lecture, looks over at her young sage. And this room is the bubble for us? Luca wants to say yes. He wants to experience oneness with Gisella and leave the apartment only for pastries and bottles of beer to share. But this visualization of time occupies him even more than her questions, her secrets, and the scent of the two of them. Everyone lives a different actuality, so of the billions of different bubbles, we never exist in the same one. She turns and asks Luca if they're in the same one when they make love. Whichever invisible bubble he is in bursts. Whatever he says will be too honest or dishonest, too calculated and scientific, or too vague and philosophical. He cycles through his options, calculating how to turn around this chess match from a losing position. The outcome remains the same. Mate. She pulls on a t-shirt and flicks out her hair. Really? Not even when we're thinking the same thing? Again, he wants to say yes, but instead, he babbles something about shared dreams. He can't even remember where he read the idea about bubbles. The rumble of the coffee pot from the kitchen snaps them out of their individual thoughts and back into the room. Gisella walks around the bed, passing under the painting of a wounded Jesus. She stops with her hand on the door. It's a shame you can't see the bubbles inside the coffee pot when it's hot. You could test your theory. Luca lies back and smiles. She opens the door and walks out. The presence of the two of them that was trapped in the sheets and the walls and curtains follows her out into the corridor. Time elapsed. 80 milliliters of water, evaporated through roasted beans and poured to serve in 2 tiny cups.
Great, thank you, Phil. Well read. Right, I mean, well, just get the ball rolling. Phil, for those of you who don't know, what exactly is a novella in Flash?
Yeah, it's quite a difficult question to answer. Whether it's a sort of new form or something that's been around for a while is a bit of a topic of debate. Essentially, a novella means, a short novel. They're usually around 10 to 30,000 words, I'd say. Of course, that depends. And the idea of it being in Flash is these very short chapters. So essentially, it's a group of very short pieces which are connected by one overstory. And in my novella, that overstory is the lecture which this guy Luca is giving, this lecture about time.
Great. Well, why did you choose this theme, this theme of time?
I guess, like a lot of things, a lot of my stories start with me saying I want to do something. Like I want to write a story about a down on his luck country singer, even if I don't know a lot about down on their luck country singers. So for some reason, one day I thought, I'd like to write a group of stories, a set of stories about time. Maybe because I was like interested in how time can be used in fiction and in stories. And then I figured out that writing even one short story about time that's good would take a hell of a long time. So I sort of thought that this book could be presented as, a group of like shorter writings. I didn't really know what a novella in Flash was. I think I'd maybe read a couple or heard a bit about it, but it was a bit more sort of research and figuring out these different short pieces could be tied together. That's how it came about. Yeah, but really just because I sort of got an interest in time and thought, I wonder, how that could make an interesting book.
Yeah, great. What about Luca, the main character? Why did you choose him specifically as to be the focus in the book, to be the protagonist?
I think his was one of the first pieces I wrote, or I wrote a couple of pieces about him when I was starting. And really because I thought the way that these stories could be connected, all these different people in, hearing a lecture about time is by the person giving that lecture. So throughout the sort of iterations of the book, he became more of like the main character, and he sort of plays a role at the beginning and in the middle of the book and at the end, as well as he's speaking and giving this lecture throughout the different chapters. So I suppose because he's a way to tie these pieces together, but we're always influenced by the people that we meet. I had a history professor when I studied in Italy called Luca. Not that this character is particularly based on him, but little Easter eggs like that sort of make their way into stories, I guess.
Yeah, very interesting. Just Phil, slightly going off piece. Luca is obviously your main character, and he comes back in various chapters, and then you have other characters sort of entering your novella. What about their timing? When did you know that they were going to come into the book at that point?
Yeah, I suppose when I thought of exploring different aspects of time, that was what I went to first. So after doing some sort of research and finding out more about what time is, which I warn everyone is like a dangerous rabbit hole to go down. So watch out for that. Yeah, so I thought about these different themes of time. Like one, for example, is how time is different at altitude, or how time can be different in space. So yeah, I sort of went for those themes first, and then created characters who could expose those themes because they fitted in with their lives or their stories.
Yeah. You mentioned sort of the process of writing. Can you give us more of an overview? I imagine lots of research because there are lots of different angles. Like you say, there's this sort of there's the science fiction. There's obviously the element of space and the future, physics, psychology. How exactly? How did you map out the book? How did you research? How did you start writing? How did it come together?
Yeah, well, I mean, I don't want to scare anyone off in that it shouldn't be too highbrow and difficult to understand. The idea of Luca is that his speciality is like the philosophy of time. So he's a philosophy professor, really, but he understands a lot of different elements and ideas about time. And the process of the book was writing a lecture and then cutting out most of the lecture and adding stories in, because I think when I looked back at sort of my initial efforts of the book, the lectures were getting quite long, and yeah, I wondered, readers aren't going to come. I'm going to be interested in a lecture about time. Really, this is stories about time and how they're connected. So I think, yeah, of all the research I did, lots of it is probably not made the book because it wasn't relevant to the stories. So that was interesting in like the way that it took shape. Yeah, I think initially I wrote some of the stories, then I figured out this way to connect them and started writing, more lecture content. And then, as I said, sort of ended up reducing that in the end. And yeah, of course, it went through a couple of different iterations. I wrote it in 2020 initially, and then last year it went through a few sort of changes and updates before coming out last month.
Brilliant. Do you is time as a theme, is it explored enough in fiction, or is it about to have its moment again?
I hope it is. I know of another flash fiction writer that I admire very much, Tanya Hirschman. She has written a book on time that is out on submission at the moment. So I'm hoping that, or I think maybe it's coming out next year. I can't remember what she said. But that is something to look out for. There is a book that is in a way similar to this, called Einstein's Dreams, which was written by an MIT professor in the 90s. It's fiction, and it's about all the different other possibilities of what Einstein's theory of relativity is. Again, that sounds a bit highbrow, but it's quite fantastical and amazing. And they're just very short, like chapters about, the way Einstein's vision could have been different and how time could be completely warped or different. I guess some other short fiction writers have written about it. I haven't read many novels on the theme of time. Maybe it's a bit heavy, or it would be difficult in a novel structure. I'm sure there are like plenty of stories about that. I don't know. Do you know any?
Oh no, I mean, right now, obviously, if anyone wants to comment in the chat, if there's any books that sort of that spring to mind with time as the emphasis. I did watch the Tenets last night, the Christopher Nolan film. So obviously, that's something he. Guys, I have a marching band outside the window, so I might just move on, just to Phil, so I can mute this. If anyone does have any comments on time in literature, obviously, we have the chat open. Phil, you've also mentioned Coming Up Short, which was your Substack publication. Could you maybe say a little bit about that, and I can put a link in the chat?
Yeah, sure. Just going back to what you said about other books, other novels, and things about time. It's not that present in fiction, I think. I mean, in film, like you said, it's much more prevalent, right? Everybody's watched time travel movies, and there's, a lot of films and TV shows about time and about how that's changeable. So yeah, it's maybe interesting to think like why that is, and it's not explored so much in fiction. I guess fiction's already quite easy to manipulate time. Things don't have to go in order, and in a movie that can be quite confusing. But yeah, onto this. Just to say, if anyone is not following my author newsletter, which is really just chat about short fiction, it's got loads of recommendations of things to read, things to watch, things to listen to. Then yeah, I write once a month about that kind of stuff, the history of short fiction, some of the themes, like time or like nature. Those are a couple of recent ones that I've written about. So yeah, feel free to check that out and follow along if you're interested in reading more short stories, which is my goal in life, is to get more people reading more short stories. So.
Definitely. On that subject, Phil, what are you working on right now?
At the moment, I've mostly been writing flash fiction in the last couple of years. I wrote a short story quite recently. It was a horror short story. That was something new for me. But my major work in progress is a novel about, what is it about? Mythology, really. And especially like the lore of the sea. That's Lore lore. So yeah, I'm now deep in research about sea monsters and mermaids and all kind of sea mythology, which is pretty interesting. But it's certainly not anything that's near to being finished. So yeah, I'm looking forward to spending some time working on that this year, and we'll see how that pans out.
Brilliant.
What about yourself, Will? What are you working on?
Oh, good question. No, I'm not working enough. Something will happen, but it's not coming right now. Phil, what we can do is probably now's a good time to get the heat off my back and to ask you to read a second reading. So you introduced Luca in your first reading. What comes next? What's the second?
Yeah, thanks. So the second reading is from close to the end of the book, and it's a character called Tom, who is one of the students in the lecture. Tom has been listening along. He's quite interested in space. He's someone who wanted to travel to the moon as a kid. And the title of this chapter is Cocktails at the Pioneer Cafe. Tom knew his father would be late, but he sat there watching the door like some southern belle, waiting for Daddy to return from battle. This is not Tennessee. He's in the Pioneer Cafe, Section 15B of Capitol Station, Mars. His father has already been away 10 Earth years, so why not wait a little longer? The airlock opens, and for what feels like the 100th time, his father is standing there with the same yellow teeth and the same stellar transit uniform, a traveller from the past. Tom wonders whose hair is greyer now. It takes the man a couple of laps around the cafe before he notices Tom. As he approaches, his bootsteps barely sound in the pressurized cafe hub. "Son," he says. At least it wasn't a question. Tom waits for more small talk, but he comes up empty. "I'll get us a couple of doghouse brews, eh, Tommy boy?" That ratty unfiltered stuff was banned under the last health mandate. Of course, he wouldn't know that. Tom tells his father he could do with something to fill him out, and orders 2 protein cocktails on the console. 1 minute of awkward silence later, they arrive. His father takes a sip and stares with eyes so hollow, Tom's not sure if he's lost all sense of taste or if he's gotten better at masking his disgust. "Got any news for me?" he asks, as though his son has been saving up pictures of the grandkids and writing them a card each holiday. Tom asks him how long he's back for. 10 days, he says, and sips his pink drink, this time pulling a face. He can't decide what's worse, the drink or the time off the ship. He's lost muscle. Maybe he's sick. Maybe it's bad this time. The airlock opens and the last remaining customers walk into the tunnel, back to their lives, furthering the reaches of the human race. Now it's just the 2 of them, the hiss of the ventilation system, and 2 protein cocktails sitting on the cold steel table. Tom considers asking him about his job, about the things he's seen, and about how it feels to see pioneers age like they're stuck in fast forward. Really, he wants to ask why his dad brought him to this ugly rock as a kid and accepted a job that took him as far away as possible. Maybe Tom should ask him why he missed Doghouse Brew more than he missed his family. But he doesn't. Those questions will still be there in another 10 years. After a few more minutes ignoring his drink, something fires up his father's blue flame eyes. He undoes the top button on his uniform and asks, "You want to know what it's like to travel at the speed of light?" Time elapsed, 1/7 of a life, 1/70th of a life.
Great. Well read, Phil. Thank you. Right, guys, now might be a good time if you have any questions, if you'd like to type in the chat. Maybe, Thomas, great start. Maybe if you want, maybe we can, if someone has a question that they can type in the chat, they could maybe unmute if they wanted to ask Phil directly, or if you'd prefer, I can read the question, whichever you'd prefer. In the meantime, while you think of questions, or if there's anything burning that you want to ask Phil, Phil, could you just tell us a bit more about your influences before the questions start coming in?
Yeah, thanks. I get influences. I mean, I read lots and lots of short fiction, so that's good for getting influences from all around, I suppose. Some of my favorite short fiction writers, Flannery O'Connor, who's American, was writing in the sort of 40s, 50s, I think, or maybe before. Italo Calvino is a big favorite of mine. He was an Italian writer, short fiction as well. Borges, I like Borges, and very philosophical sort of short fiction. But yeah, really, I like reading short stories because you get great variety. I actually run a club as well where we talk about short stories in this kind of Zoom setting, and it's great because people from all over the world log in, and we talk about stories from Nigeria or India or Argentina or wherever really. So that's cool. Yeah, so I'm not sure for this book I could name specific influences, but varied.
Great. So Sarah James, Sarah, would you like to maybe unmute yourself? And great question. Maybe could you ask Phil directly? Maybe.
Or unmute first. Okay, put Phil on the spot. So, who was the trickiest character to understand and write, and why?
Good question. I suppose there's 12 or 13 characters, even though there's sort of 15 little sections, because as I said, Luca pops up a few times. I suppose some of the characters I didn't understand didn't make the book, they didn't make the cut. But yeah, probably Luca, the main character. He's a 50-something, quite famous, popular sort of philosopher or scientist. He's written books or he's been on the TV, and he's taught all over the world. So yeah, he's somebody that I think, understanding what he wanted to accomplish was quite difficult. Hopefully you'll see that at the end of the book, but he gets into a bit of trouble as well along the way.
Phil, on the subject of trouble, how much trouble do you like to get your characters into?
I mean, normally a lot. I'm regularly telling people you should put characters, you should give them a cat that they love that's stuck up a tree, and also give them a fear of heights. And then once they climb the tree to save their cat, they should have to jump out of it because the tree sets on fire. So lots, basically. But in fact, in this book, I suppose with flash fiction, characters aren't always facing sort of direct conflict. It's often past trauma that comes up for these characters, and I think that's true in some of the stories in this book as well. So yeah, often it's difficult pasts sort of manifesting in the present. That's what I think can make gripping flash fiction, which maybe that's quite difficult, quite different, sorry, in other forms. Will's more of a novel writer, so what do you think about that, Will? Should characters get into deeper and deeper holes?
Oh yeah, how do you write a book? Do you follow structures? Do you write books? Do you write chapters with consequences? I don't know. You've got to have a back history, haven't you? There has to be a catalogue of mistakes that start coming through in the book. I don't know. I feel this is pub talk, but I like to, when I think about what I'm writing now, and I'm always quite cagey talking about what I'm doing, because I think naturally you're quite protective. Sometimes you just want to throw the kitchen sink at a character, don't you? In terms of mistakes, affairs, money, something family related. I always love something, hidden family secrets, things that can't be hidden any longer. And the book starting at the point where everything is bubbling over, and it's the book beginning at the point where the end cannot start any sooner. That's really what I think of. Well, I don't know.
Yeah, and it can be difficult to make characters likable without using quite obvious memes like, oh, they're an orphan, or they've lost their partner, or something which is maybe overused. So yeah, especially with characters who come from sort of maybe richer backgrounds or privileged backgrounds, it can be harder to make them likable, I guess. So that's another interesting sort of thing about the way characters end up.
Definitely. Ian, great question. Would you like to unmute yourself and ask Phil your question directly?
Hello. Yeah. So, what have you learned? What's been your learnings through writing the book, and what have you learned about time because of this?
Thanks, Ian. Yeah, good question. I suppose what have I learned through writing the book? I was saying to Will earlier that the initial idea or the initial writing maybe took 3 months or a little more, but this book has taken quite a while to come to fruition. So yeah, what I've learned is the process of sort of making a book like this happen. Obviously, I'm really grateful to Sarah at V Press and for her help as well in editing and guiding me through the process of getting this book into print. Have I gained any insights about time? I don't want to paint myself as an expert about time. It was so mind-bendingly difficult to learn about all the different aspects of what time is. I've done my very best to forget them. So I definitely am no expert about time. I will, however, drop this link for everyone, which is something that was one of my first finds in doing this project, which is a podcast created by a time management application. I think it's a Norwegian company or some sort of software company, and they commissioned these cool podcasts on what time is. And it was a great introduction to the topic. I think there's only 5 episodes, so you're not gonna, lose an entire month listening to them. And yeah, I found it very interesting. They speak to some experts, but it's fairly easy to follow. So if you're interested in delving a bit deeper, yeah, I recommend listening to those.
And is it written chronologically, or does it play with time in the sense of moving about from chapter to chapter?
It's basically the lecture. So just to explain a little bit more, there's 15 chapters which start in a lecture hall and then go into a story, and the stories are what I read tonight, 2 of those. I think the lecture is chronological, just about. There might be a little bit of playing around with time, but I suppose the stories are, what explore how time can be different for each of those characters and those people in the room. Yeah, that's sort of the idea. But there's a lot of good ways you can play with time and stories. We can write backward stories and speed up time, slow down time. So that's quite interesting. And yeah, I could probably give you a few examples on that as well. In fact, if you want to know about that, probably check out that Substack link that I wrote. I think I wrote some stuff about time on that too. Thanks for the questions.
Brilliant. Any other questions before we go on? Phil, just in the meantime, let's talk about the actual process of novella-in-flash. What kind of advice would you give someone who's sort of tempted, or someone who reads your book and feels inspired? What advice would you give?
I suppose, like with any form of fiction, read a lot of that type of fiction. There's not so many novellas in Flash, but there is. I'll just type his name in to the chat box. Michael Loveday is a British writer and writing tutor, and he's got a lot of resources and a lot of knowledge about what the novella-in-flash is. He's a sort of real expert in the UK. So I think follow his website or his Facebook group to find out a bit more and read some. How do you write a novella-in-flash? just start writing the individual pieces. You know, if they're meant to fit together, you can probably find a way to do that. But bear in mind that you have to leave out huge gaps as well. Really, a novella in Flash is like, you know, half of it is written by the reader. They have to figure out a lot and add in the details of what the gaps are between these chapters. So yeah, deciding what to leave out is important too.
What about your voice? You've mentioned how you've maybe 7 or 8 different characters, people entering and returning back to Luca. How important was each individual's voice to you when you were sort of mapping out their characters?
I suppose it depends on the novella in Flash. I've read some which are, you know, one character or one main story through time and just many cuts in time. It's a sort of like a fractured novel. So in that way, it'd be easier to keep one consistent voice. Yeah, what was the question? How important were different voices?
Absolutely. When you think of sort of longer forms, I mean, Cloud Atlas being a bit of a classic go-to when people think about different books, different periods and characters, which was obviously written in very different styles. So how important to you is the feel of a book or the way the narrator or the point of view sounds?
I think often that's very important. For this book, I suppose the overriding voice is the one of the lecture. It's, you know, how this person is delivering his thoughts and these different aspects of time. So I guess this book is more thematic, and although these characters have different voices, that's maybe something more important in a longer work if you have quite obviously different characters. But yeah, I mean, I'm sure it is important in like a novel that's told from the perspective of different people. And it would be more important if we went back to certain characters as well, which this book goes back to the lecture, you know, and Luca's speech.
Brilliant. Guys, some great questions, really good. Anything else before we start to close things? I think that's good. Phil, what about you? Anyone else to thank?
Yes, definitely. Thank you very much to the publisher, of course. It's been great to work together and put this book out. I really hope that people like it. Anyone else to thank? Yes, all the people that have helped me. Oh, I should say thank you to Ken Elks, who is another great short fiction writer and mentor. Tommy Dean, who's from the States. They provided quotes for the back cover. Also David Eagleman, who is a big inspiration of mine. He's a Stanford professor and neuroscientist, and he wrote a brilliant book called SUM, that's S-U-M, about alternative afterlives. So check that one out if you can. So thanks to them. Thanks to anyone else who helped with the book. I think I've thanked a couple of people inside the cover. And thank you to all of you for coming tonight. And to anyone who reads the book.
Brilliant. Excellent. Lovely comment from Sarah. Sarah says, fabulous readings, Phil. Lovely to hear you in your voice. And thank you. So really good. Phil, would you like to take a screenshot? What's best?
I have got lots of notes to take screenshots, but I think as we're recording, I can do that later. But yeah, it's been great to read to you guys, and thanks very much for coming along. I hope anyone watching on the recording as well enjoys it. I'll put a link to the book. That's the most important thing, right? Yes, there's a link to the VPress website where you can get a copy of the book. Please buy it from the publisher because we really need to support independent, brilliant presses like VPress. So thank you to them. And also, if anyone is outside of the UK, I guess a couple of you are, especially if you're in Spain, it might be quicker or easier to organize an author copy. So feel free to get in touch with me and I'll tell you how I can send you a copy.
Brilliant. Now, Phil, you mentioned your monthly publications, so that is Substack. Did you? I think you put a link to that earlier in the chat.
Yeah, that's linked in the chat. I will. Well, I'll post it again just so everyone's got it. Follow along. And oh yeah, that's the time one. Okay, well, you can find other posts on there too. So yeah, please follow along, and thanks everyone for coming.
Brilliant. Phil, would you like to finish? There's I know there's a quote or quotation you'd like to read.
Yes. Yeah, I hope Lucas is still there. Being from Argentina, he should enjoy this one. I wanted to leave you all with a quote from Jose Luis Borges, who's an Argentine writer. And he wrote a bit about time. And the quote is this: "Time is the substance I am made of. Time is a river which sweeps me along, but I am the river. It is a tiger which destroys me, but I am the tiger. It is the fire which consumes me, but I am the fire."
Brilliant.
He's back. He's listening. That's great. Awesome. All right. Thank you very much for coming, everyone. And hope you enjoyed the book. Please feel free to get in touch with me any way you know how. And yeah, have a great month.